Chapter 1. To save my childhood sweetheart, I suffered severe burns all over my body and became a hideous monster. But she thought I was just a meddler who had ruined her relationship with her first love. After we married, she often mocked my appearance in public and even brought her old flame home right in front of me. As I lay dying, she was still full of resentment. She said that if she could do it all over again, she would rather have died alone in the fire than have anything to do with me. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn before the fire ever happened. This time, I chose to let them be together. 1. The smell of antiseptic filled the hospital corridor. Victoria Jones's parents were sobbing uncontrollably outside the burn unit's intensive care ward. It was as if my ears were stuffed with cotton. All the sounds around me became a muffled blur. I didn't snap out of it until my mother grabbed my hand. "Sincere, go comfort your uncle and aunt. They need you right now." I shook my head sharply, trying to clear the fog. Just then the attending physician came out, his expression grave, and told Victoria's parents to prepare themselves for the worst. The fire was too intense. The patient has third-degree burns on her face and neck. Although we were able to save her life, she will have permanent scars. There will be varying degrees of tissue atrophy and deformation. Even with plastic surgery, it will be nearly impossible to restore her original appearance. The implication was clear. Victoria's beautiful face, her greatest source of pride, was ruined. Victoria's mother collapsed on the spot. I subconsciously touched my own unblemished face. The skin was smooth, the contours sharp, exactly as it had been before. I had been reborn. In my past life, Victoria had run into a few thugs on her way home late one night. A boy happened to be passing by and came to her rescue. In such a helpless situation, his appearance was like a savior's descent from heaven. Soon Victoria fell head over heels in love with him, but the relationship made her parents lose sleep. They felt the boy's background was shady. At the dinner table that day, Victoria's parents started in on her again. What kind of decent person hangs around the neighborhood entrance in the middle of the night? He was probably in with those drunks. Victoria frowned and retorted, "I told you if he hadn't shown up, I don't know what would have happened. He saved you, and that means you can just date him? Vicky, you're too naive. Look at Sincere. Go ask his parents if they would let him get involved with some unknown." I kept my head down and ate, but I was suddenly dragged into the conversation. Before her mother could finish, Victoria slammed the door and stormed out. In this life, I remained in my seat, watching her retreating back without giving chase. In my previous life, I had chased her all the way to her rented apartment, arriving just as the fire broke out. I rushed into the flames to save her, but was struck in the face by a collapsing beam. From then on, my face was covered in grotesque scars, never to look the same again. Out of guilt, Victoria offered to marry me. "What about him?" I had asked softly. She shrugged nonchalantly. "My parents don't approve. Why force it?" She said it so casually, but after the wedding, she avoided me like the plague. Sometimes, when she was drunk, she would hold me and weep. Meanwhile, my scars became inflamed and ulcerated, leading to a severe infection that required extensive skin grafts. 2. One day, I overheard Victoria talking to her parents disfigured like that it would be better if he were just gone. How is Sincere Smith still alive? Everything I had done was born from a sliver of pity for Victoria, and yet she was cursing me, wishing I were dead. In despair, I floored the accelerator and crashed my car into a bridge abutment. A second before the car exploded, Victoria abandoned me and tried to escape on her own. But it was a death trap. Neither of us could escape. In her final moments, Victoria had shrieked, "If I could choose again, I'd rather be disfigured than ever meet you." Chapter 2. When I opened my eyes, I was reborn. This time, when Victoria left, I chose to stay and finish my dinner. I remembered how she used to say in my past life, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "If you hadn't been such a meddler and saved me, maybe we both would have been fine." She was right. The gears of fate continued to turn as they were meant to. As I was contemplating the unpredictable nature of life, a pained groan echoed from the hospital room. Victoria had woken up and could not accept that her beautiful face was destroyed. "Honey, don't touch the wounds. The doctor said the burns are severe. We're lucky you're alive." I looked over and saw Victoria trembling, trying to touch her face while her parents held her hands down. She was still desperately trying to reach for a mirror. She mumbled, "This isn't real. It's just a small injury. My face won't scar." Mrs. Jones turned away, sobbing silently. I felt a storm of conflicting emotions. Mrs. Jones had always treated me like her own son, showing me immense kindness in my past life. Seeing her like this now, I only hated that she had raised such a selfish daughter. I started to walk over to help call a nurse to calm her down, but Victoria glared at me venomously. "Get out, I'm fine. I don't need your fake sympathy." A nurse tried to intervene, but I stopped her. Now our roles were reversed. It was my turn to watch her suffer, completely unscathed. After our wedding, Victoria had become convinced that I had deliberately rescued her from the fire to trap her into marriage through moral obligation. From that day on, she hated me to her core. Once my scars were so inflamed that I couldn't sleep from the pain. I tried to get some medicine, but she had locked me in the room. I was sweating profusely from the pain, and when I looked up, I saw her reflection in the mirror as she watched me coldly from outside the door. In that moment, my heart died completely. A voice interrupted my thoughts. "Vicky, please stop this. Just focus on getting better, okay? Mom is begging you." Seeing Mrs. Jones trembling, I sighed to myself. Chapter 3. Victoria, your wounds are in the acute inflammatory stage. If you don't take care of them, the dermis will form excessive granulation tissue, causing the scar tissue to thicken and harden. The nurse glanced at me, puzzled, as if asking how I knew so much. I had experienced all this pain firsthand. Every single second was seared into my memory. This time I wanted nothing more to do with Victoria Jones. But my mother, mindful of our years as neighbors, insisted that I look after her. When it was time to change her dressings, the pungent smell of antiseptic and ointment hit me. I couldn't help but step back, while Victoria just bit her lip, silent, so concerned with appearances. How would she cope in the future? On the drive home, I casually brought it up. "That boy who was with you when you got hurt, how come he hasn't come to see you?" At the mention of him, Mr. and Mrs. Jones's expressions darkened. During the fire, the boy had abandoned Victoria and fled on his own. In the rearview mirror, I saw the light in Victoria's eyes instantly dim. After a long pause, she said coldly, "Ethan said he's busy with work these days. He'll come see me in a few days." I knew her too well. She was just trying to save face. Mrs. Jones started to say something, but Mr. Jones gently tugged on her sleeve. I decided to press the sore spot, speaking deliberately to her mother. Just let her see whoever she wants. After an injury this severe, seeing someone she likes might lift her spirits. I wanted nothing more. I only hoped Victoria and Ethan Miller would be entangled for a lifetime and stop hurting others. Mrs. Jones opened her mouth, then closed it again, remaining silent. I knew exactly what she was thinking. Victoria and I were childhood sweethearts, and both our families had always assumed we would get married. As for my feelings for Victoria, I thought about it, but I couldn't remember when I first started to fall for her. And when did that affection fade? Was it the time she publicly accused me of harassing her, all for Ethan's sake? Or was it the day she forgot my birthday because she was with him? Now I saw her as a stranger. I wouldn't go out of my way to seek revenge. But I wouldn't intervene in her life again either. I wished her and Ethan Miller a lifetime of happiness together. I just wondered if that Ethan fellow could handle the misery that was to come. My family and the Joneses were neighbors, but as long as I didn't initiate contact, we never ran into each other. It was a week before I saw her again. Victoria was taking a walk in the neighborhood, leaning on her beloved's arm, when she ran into my mother and me coming back from grocery shopping. Chapter 4. Auntie, let me formally introduce you. This is my future other half, Ethan Miller. Victoria's voice was filled with joy, and despite the thick gauze wrapped around her face, I could see the unmistakable smile in her eyes. My mother and I offered our congratulations, but Ethan quietly pulled his hand away from Victoria's grasp. "Vicky, don't say that," Ethan said, shifting his feet awkwardly. "My parents don't know about this yet." After so many years, Victoria finally wore the same blissful expression she'd had as a teenager. "As long as you're willing, we can get married tonight. Ethan, our marriage is already set." Watching Victoria bask in the happiness she had woven for herself, I didn't have the heart to tear through the fragile veil. When we got home, my mom was still sighing. That Victoria, she's had such a tough life. To think how beautiful she used to be, and now? I shook my head gently. This is the path she chose for herself. It was the same in every lifetime. I mumbled in agreement, but my mother kept looking toward our neighbor's house, sighing endlessly. "Your Uncle Richard is in such a pitiful state." Following her gaze, I saw Mr. Jones sitting alone in a wicker chair in his yard, his eyes vacant. I hadn't noticed when his temples had become streaked with gray. I remembered how in my past life Victoria always complained that if I hadn't interfered, she and Ethan would have had their happy ending long ago. When I retorted, "But you were the one who insisted on taking responsibility for me because I was injured for you," it only made things worse. I suppose that's the truth in the saying that a favor demanded becomes a grudge. She had stared at my face, her eyes dark and terrifying. "Sincere Smith, stop pretending you were clearly in love with me and did everything you could to marry me. You and my dad planned this together. You just wanted to use this to force my hand." I had remained silent. Me, Sincere Smith. I was a decent catch. Why would I need to destroy my own face for someone who couldn't see reality? Mr. Jones hastily wiped a tear from his eye and looked away. I lowered my head silently. To this day, Victoria naively believed that her meeting with Ethan was fated. She never knew that I had investigated in my past life and found out that Ethan Miller was just a social climber looking for a rich girl to latch onto. To run into Victoria, Ethan had waited on her route home countless times. Even the hero saving the damsel moment that had won her heart was nothing more than a scam he had staged himself. Chapter 5. Mr. Jones personally delivered the invitation to the engagement party. His eyes were filled with regret. Sincere, actually. I smiled, handed the invitation to my mother, and changed the subject. "Mr. Jones, my friend and I have opened a restaurant together. The grand opening is the day after tomorrow, so I have to head over there tomorrow." In my previous life, after I was disfigured, Victoria wanted nothing to do with me. Only my university roommate came to visit occasionally. Every time I was rolling on the floor in agony from my scars, he was the one who would carefully help me up, never once showing any disgust at my scarred face. But he was unlucky himself. He married a moocher who funneled all his salary into her younger brother's business ventures. In this life, I would get him out of there before he could ever get married. I considered it repayment for his past kindness. Mr. Jones froze for a moment, then said my decision was too hasty. Later that night, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Victoria, her face wrapped in thick gauze, with only her eyes showing. I frowned and tried to close the door. She stuck her hand out to stop me. After a moment of silent confrontation, she pulled a small bag of candy from her purse. "You're moving away to start a business, so you can't come to my engagement party?" Chapter 2. I nodded but didn't take the candy. She was silent for a long time before she suddenly apologized. What I said at the dinner table that day was too harsh. I was just angry at my dad. "Don't take it to heart." What had she said? Oh, right. Mr. Jones was against her relationship with Ethan, thinking I was the most suitable choice. Victoria had directed all her anger at me. "In your dreams, I don't have the slightest feeling for Sincere Smith, so don't waste your breath." I didn't know if those words were meant for me or for her father. Now it didn't matter anymore. I gave a faint smile. "Right, I still have to pack. You should go home." The next day, I met up with my friend, and we flew directly to our destination. The restaurant's business was surprisingly good, with a constant stream of customers. Here, we heard countless stories from all walks of life. One night, as we were closing up, chatting and drinking with a few regulars, Leo suddenly said, "Sincere, you've changed a lot." I looked at him, puzzled. "How so?" "You're so independent and capable now, you do everything yourself. You weren't like that in university. You'd lie in bed and make me bring you a glass of water." His exaggerated tone made me laugh. After being disfigured in my past life, I needed help with everything. This time I was perfectly fine, and I was determined to pay back his kindness tenfold. Chapter 6. A year later, I saw Victoria Jones again. I'd just gotten home when I noticed the neighbors were moving. When I ran into Mrs. Jones, she recognized me, then immediately turned and walked away. Her reaction was the complete opposite of what I had expected. "Mom, where are they moving to?" I asked, a little curious. The atmosphere between our two families felt strange this time I was back. Did something unpleasant happen while I was away? My dad started to say something, but then he just shook his head and swallowed his words. From my bedroom window, I had a clear view of everything next door. Victoria was covering her face, walking cautiously with each step. The face that was once the envy of so many was now hidden behind thick layers of gauze. Mr. Jones was moving furniture when he suddenly lost his temper. He slammed a cardboard box onto the ground, turned around and slapped Victoria across the face. The scene reminded me of when she used to get spanked as a child for being naughty. But this time, the snippets of conversation I overheard made me realize this was something far more serious. And stranger still, where was Ethan Miller? I must have been staring too intently, because my dad tapped me on the shoulder, displeased. They were about to get engaged. Old Jones saw how determined his daughter was, so even though he was reluctant, he had to accept it. Look at the state Victoria is in now. What kind of good family would want her? Sigh. My dad always had a knack for putting himself in other people's shoes. Just get to the point, I said, cutting off his long-winded story. Only then did I learn that Ethan Miller had scammed Victoria out of $300,000. Although both our families were well off, that was still a substantial amount of money. The Jones family had been desperate to finalize the marriage, and the money was transferred to Ethan on the day of the engagement party. Who would have thought that 3 months later, Ethan would suddenly start a rumor that Victoria was cheating on him with another man? He even produced some suggestive photos and stormed over to the Joneses' house to cause a huge scene. To put it bluntly, he wanted to call off the wedding. Ethan had shouted, "Look at her ugly face now, she doesn't even look like a normal person anymore. How could I possibly spend my life with a monster like that?" We're through. Victoria had just stood there, completely stunned. Seeing her daughter in such a state, Mrs. Jones was naturally unwilling to let him go so easily. Finally, left with no other choice, they agreed to break up but demanded the money back. But Ethan's family brazenly claimed the money was compensation for their emotional distress. They refused to return a single cent. Now, the Jones family had not only lost the money but also their reputation. They were utterly humiliated. The old couple, who had lived in the neighborhood for decades, were now too ashamed to even leave their house. After hearing all this, I had intended to stay out of it. To my surprise, Victoria herself asked me to meet her in the neighborhood garden. I refused immediately, but my dad insisted I go and try to talk some sense into her. Victoria walked slowly, her steps faltering on the gravel path. Seeing me sitting there, unmoving, she seemed a bit awkward. "In your eyes, I must be a fool, right? The whole neighborhood is laughing at me now." My mind was on the braised pork belly waiting for me at home, so I nodded directly. That's right. She had lost a lot of weight in the year I'd been gone. Her clothes were no longer as exquisite as they once were. She looked completely disheveled. Victoria forced a smile and subconsciously touched the mask on her face. Chapter 7. This face is so ruined I just want to rip it off. If she continued this self-destructive spiral, she was probably not far from permanent disfigurement. To be honest, I was kind of curious to see that. Although $300,000 wasn't enough to bankrupt the Jones family, it was enough to make them feel the pain for a while. After a long silence, Victoria's expression turned serious. "Sincere, do you believe that Ethan never had any of those photos?" Her words took me by surprise. Seeing my astonishment, Victoria pointed at her own face bitterly. "Look at the state I'm in. Who would want me now?" "So, Ethan, it was all lies, just slander." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself and looked up at the sky. The more she tried to act indifferent, the more obvious the pain in her eyes became. "He found a rich man's son. He just wanted to get rid of me." I had expected something like this, but Ethan Miller was ruthless. Not only did he betray her, but he also turned the tables and shamelessly pocketed the money. I wondered if his conscience was clear. Victoria suddenly asked me, "You used to avoid Ethan whenever you saw him. Why didn't you try to stop me that day when I chased after him?" I was at a loss for words. Unbelievable. No matter the situation, a woman like her could always find a way to blame someone else. Not wanting to continue the awkward conversation, I stood up and kept my distance. "I have to go. Don't look for me again." Just as I was about to turn away, Victoria grabbed my wrist. "If you had stopped me back then, would things have turned out differently?" I shook her hand off, my voice cold. "Impossible. I never would have stopped. I had come home this time to take a break and to give Leo some time to handle his personal affairs. It was strange. After all the twists and turns, he and his girlfriend had somehow ended up back together. I couldn't be bothered to persuade them to break up anymore. Chapter 8. In a way, Leo and Ethan were both stubborn. Once they set their minds on something, they didn't give up easily. All I could do was offer Leo some support from the sidelines. In the 3 years we had been running the restaurant, Leo and I split the profits 50-50. My savings grew and grew, but Leo had nothing to show for it. Every penny went into that woman's pocket. The one silver lining was that he finally saw the moocher's true colors before they got married. I hadn't been home in a whole year, and this time I was treated like a returning prince. But a few days later, I heard my dad slam the door with a loud bang. I immediately jumped out of bed and grabbed the cash from my bag. "Dad, you want some of this?" I tried to cheer him up like they do in the movies, but then I saw that his eyes were red. "What's wrong?" I dropped the joking tone. "Did you get into another fight with Mom?" My dad had been neighbors with the Jones family for decades, but today was the first time I had ever heard him curse them out. "Your mom heard the Joneses' company hasn't been doing well lately, so she went over to see if she could help. And do you know what Mr. Jones said?" I waited quietly for him to continue, but he was so angry that tears were welling up in his eyes. "That old fool actually said that I should come back and convince you to consider getting together with Victoria." I was stunned. That was unbelievably shameless. He also said that it was their fault Victoria was so immature, and that he could tell you had feelings for her. But where were they as parents when Victoria treated you so horribly back then? I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. So that was the Jones family's game. We raised our son all these years, so why should he have to take care of a disfigured girl? The way she is now, who knows if she'll be throwing tantrums every day. As he spoke, I noticed my dad was secretly watching my expression. Seeing that I had no reaction, he lowered his voice and asked, "Sincere, but seriously, you two grew up together. You don't still have feelings for her, do you?" I stuffed the money into his hand. "Don't even think about it. God had given me a second chance. I wasn't about to make the same mistakes all over again. As for the Jones family, let them self-destruct. In my past life, the final break between Victoria and me happened after a night of drinking. At the time, I had actually believed she was over Ethan Miller. 6 months into our marriage, she had, for once, offered to have dinner with me." Chapter 9. After dinner, I opened a bottle of wine. When I was slightly drunk, I curled up on the sofa and started to cry softly. I was in my early 20s, the prime of my life, yet my face was ruined. Seeing me like this, she was uncharacteristically gentle, reaching out to wipe away my tears. "I'm here. Don't cry." I looked up at her with my red, tear-filled eyes, finding her sudden tenderness almost unbelievable. Under her soft, comforting words, the tight string of my emotions finally snapped. I threw myself into her arms and sobbed uncontrollably. "Vicky, I'll never be able to face anyone for the rest of my life." Victoria gently patted my back. "Don't worry. I know you were only trying to protect me. It's thanks to you that I'm alive and able to sit here talking with you." I pulled away from her embrace and asked in a small voice, "Do you really mean that?" After 20 years of friendship, I knew exactly what Victoria looked like when she was truly happy. After our marriage, her eyes always carried a faint hint of melancholy, which I had noticed, but in that moment, Victoria wiped the tears from my face with her fingertips and made me a solemn promise. "What about you, Sincere? Do you have feelings for me? Growing up, did you always want to be with me?" The secret feelings I had buried since my youth were brought back to the surface. My heart pounded violently, the thumping echoing in my ears. Meeting her expectant gaze, I answered softly, "Yes." The next second, I watched as the tenderness in Victoria's eyes vanished, replaced by a bone-chilling mockery. She leaped to her feet, backing away a few steps, and pointed at my face, scolding me for my audacity. "So it was because of those little feelings that you ran into the fire, leaving me with no choice but you. You've ruined my happiness for the rest of my life. Are you satisfied now?" Sincere Smith, the thought of us spending the last 20 years together makes me sick to my stomach. The alcohol had worn off. I stared blankly at the woman before me, who had transformed in an instant. The sudden change left me completely blindsided, but in her eyes, my confusion was just a pathetic act. "Stop pretending. If I hadn't forced you, you never would have told the truth. Sincere Smith, when are you going to stop pretending to be a pitiful victim?" Then there was a loud bang as Victoria slammed the door and left. That night it felt as if she had ruthlessly trampled me into the ground. Only later did I find out. That was the day Ethan Miller held his engagement ceremony. He had married into the family of a wealthy local matron and now had to take care of her older son. Chapter 10. After Victoria's mother tried to set us up, I adopted a cold shoulder policy toward the Jones family. Mrs. Jones tried several times to find an opportunity to talk to me. I always rejected her with the harshest words I could muster, saying that my bright future shouldn't be wasted taking care of a disfigured woman. Eventually, she gave up on the idea. After all, I was now a successful businessman, and I kept my distance from anything imperfect. The day after Leo broke up with his girlfriend, we returned to the restaurant. A month of peace passed before Leo's ex-girlfriend showed up at our door. That day, she threw a tantrum, screaming and rolling on the floor, scaring away more than half of our customers. Leo was furious and immediately called the police, but the woman said with confidence, "Officer, this is a couple's dispute. He owes me money, and I'm here to collect. I'll leave as soon as I get paid." We managed to get rid of her the first time. The second time was also successful, but after she came back several more times, even the police were at a loss. This kind of troublesome woman who knows the law is the trickiest. She hasn't caused any actual harm, so we don't have the authority to take action. Leo clenched his fists, struggling to contain his anger. "You're the one who took over 100,000 from me, and now you're turning it around on me? Give up. You're not getting a single cent," the woman sneered and sat down at the entrance of the restaurant. She looked as if she wouldn't leave until she got what she wanted. For 3 consecutive days, business was abysmal. Just as Leo was about to break, the security guards I had hired finally arrived. They acted swiftly, chasing the woman away in a disheveled mess. Just as she was about to flee, Victoria happened to appear. The woman, who had been looking defeated, suddenly perked up. "Well, if it isn't the great Miss Jones?" Victoria was well known in town, so it was no surprise the woman recognized her. "I heard Miss Jones was betrayed by her fiancé. Are you here looking for a new sucker to take you in? Why don't you show some kindness and give me a little pocket money? 3 million should be enough, haha." Victoria's face flushed with anger as she told her to get lost. She even threatened, "If you come here to cause trouble again, I'll beat you up every time I see you," but the woman just looked Victoria up and down with contempt, her tone dripping with acid. "Victoria Jones, do you still think you're the little princess born with a silver spoon in her mouth? You're nothing but a fallen socialite now. Stop acting so high and mighty." Victoria clenched her fists, her body trembling, but she couldn't say a word. I sighed softly and turned back into the restaurant. Whatever. I had enough assets and family backing to support me. I certainly didn't need her playing the hero here. Chapter 11, but I had underestimated Victoria's persistence. She followed me in quietly, her eyes full of longing as she looked around. Finally, I asked softly, "Did your parents know you came here on your own?" Victoria lowered her head and said nothing. "Don't tell me you came all this way just to tour my restaurant." Seeing her still looking dejected, I sighed softly. Just as I was about to ask her to leave, she finally spoke. She said, "Sincere, my family is bankrupt." Even though I had anticipated it, hearing the news from her own lips still left me stunned. How is that possible? I remembered that the Jones family owned several storefronts in the most prosperous part of the city center. The income from those properties alone should have been enough for her to live a life free of financial worries. Faced with my questioning, Victoria suddenly broke down and cried. In that moment, I felt as if I were seeing my own tear-streaked face from my past life. But the Victoria from my past life was never this gentle. Every time I cried, all I ever got was the sight of her back as she slammed the door and left. "Sincere, I truly know I was wrong. Please, come back to me." Her words made me laugh. In my past life, she said that being with me was a mistake. In this life, she wanted to start over. You can't have it both ways in this world. We were never truly together, so how can we start over? Why don't we talk about your family's bankruptcy instead? After a moment of silence, Victoria finally stammered out the truth. Victoria had wanted to rekindle our old flame. The $300,000 was gone, and she had little left. Just as she was trying to figure out how to raise money, she happened to hear about a surefire investment project. It claimed that any investment would be guaranteed to double. At first, Victoria was cautious. After a trial investment of $10,000, the company sent someone over a few days later with all sorts of luxury goods. Designer handbags, diamond jewelry, you name it. Blinded by greed, Victoria not only invested all her savings but also took out a huge loan. It wasn't until a month later that she realized something was wrong. By the time she fully understood she had been scammed, the fraudsters had vanished without a trace. The Jones family's years of accumulated wealth were gone in an instant. The bank repossessed several of their storefronts to cover the debt. The family of 3 was now struggling to even make ends meet. Chapter 12. Sincere, I really know I was wrong. I should have listened to my mother back then. If I had chosen you, my family wouldn't have ended up in this situation. I frowned in annoyance. You're just hopelessly stupid. It has nothing to do with who you married. No, it's not that. Victoria shook her head, and teardrops splattered onto my sleeve. I wiped them off in disgust as she continued. My dad found out. The scammers were sent by Ethan's wife. She wanted to ruin our family. Hearing this, I almost laughed out loud. I hadn't expected Ethan to be capable of such a move. After the Jones family went bankrupt, Mr. Jones fell ill and never recovered. Although my dad had grown distant from Mr. Jones over the years, he still went to the hospital to visit him in the end. He even called me, his voice heavy. Uncle Richard was so good to you when you were little. Now he's had a stroke and is in the hospital. Do you want to go see him? We probably won't have much to do with him in the future anyway. A stroke. The situation was worse than I thought. Mr. Jones was paralyzed in his hospital bed, unable to move. His mouth was twisted and drool trickled down his chin. When he saw me, Mr. Jones immediately burst into tears. I couldn't understand what Mr. Jones was saying, but I didn't want to hear him bring up the subject of me marrying Victoria again at a time like this. I politely and distantly set down the fruit I had brought. Mr. Jones, please focus on getting better. Things will eventually look up. My dad said nothing, just quietly peeled an apple. Chapter 13. Victoria's one bad decision had plunged her entire family into crisis. In my past life, after I married her, Mr. and Mrs. Jones treated me well at first. But later, because we remained childless for so long, they gradually grew cold. Now that Victoria's face was ruined, they still wanted us to get back together. I simply couldn't bring myself to be pleasant to them. But my dad's heart softened. He paid for Mr. Jones's hospital bills and even hired a full-time caregiver to look after him. When he got home, he was still sighing. Mr. Jones has had a pitiful life. He used to take care of stray cats, so how did he end up like this in his old age? It's all that good-for-nothing daughter of his, Victoria. Son, is there any hope of getting back the money they were scammed out of? Theoretically, yes, but it would be very difficult. This was a meticulously planned act of revenge by Ethan. The money had most likely already been moved. Sincere, forget about Victoria, but your Uncle Richard's future medical expenses are no small sum. I lowered my eyes. I didn't care about Mr. Jones's medical bills, but I suddenly had a strong desire to meet this Ethan Miller. Chapter 14. The wealthy matron he had attached himself to was a well-known powerful figure in town, so I certainly wasn't going to act rashly. But as they say, the wicked can't escape justice forever. I discovered an unspeakable secret between Ethan and his stepson. When we met at a coffee shop, he gave me a contemptuous smile the moment he saw me. Well, look who it is. I crushed you years ago, and now you dare to come looking for trouble? I didn't say anything, just gestured for him to sit down and talk. Ethan probably wanted to see what kind of tricks this loser could pull, but when he saw the photos on my phone, he froze on the spot. Sincere Smith, what is the meaning of this? I casually tossed my phone on the table. Nothing. I just wanted to ask how you managed to swing both ways. With a mother and son, no less. How very progressive of you. Ethan grabbed the phone, intending to delete the photos. Unfortunately for him, it was my phone's wallpaper. Without the password, he was helpless. Sincere Smith, are you that pathetic? Our feud was over so long ago. Why are you trying to make a scene now? You're just jealous that my life is better than yours, right? I raised an eyebrow. It was true that I didn't want to see him living a life of luxury. After all, he was partly responsible for the tragedy of my past life. After our marriage, I had caught them secretly hooking up on multiple occasions. But his life now, from my perspective, wasn't all that great either. The wealthy matron wore heavy makeup and had sadistic tendencies. Everyone in their circle knew she enjoyed torturing people. Her son was even more depraved, and the photos were too graphic to look at. So I got straight to the point. The Jones family's funds were stolen by people working for you. I want you to return it now. At these words, a sarcastic smile spread across Ethan's face. He burst out laughing, wiping the corners of his eyes dramatically. What, still fighting for that ugly woman? Sincere Smith, don't tell me you're still hung up on her. How pathetic. It seems you haven't met many decent women in your life. My brow furrowed. I could ignore the other insults, but the insinuation that I still had feelings for Victoria was something I would not tolerate. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, my voice ice cold. Ethan Miller, besides climbing your way up by using women, what else are you good for? Ethan looked smug. You rich kids are so high and mighty. What right do you have to look down on me? What's wrong with me climbing the social ladder? You people were born with silver spoons in your mouths, corrupted by money from the start, and you have the nerve to call me greedy? Sincere Smith, no matter how rich you are, I still crushed you, didn't I? A cold smile played on my lips, my gaze as sharp as a knife. Since you already got what you wanted, why are you still relentlessly persecuting them? It's nothing more than your pathetic pride getting in the way. Ethan's face instantly turned ugly, and he threatened me viciously. If I can ruin the Jones family, I can ruin your family too. Chapter 15. I slowly unlocked my phone. The photos reappeared before Ethan's eyes, and my voice was indifferent. Transfer the money to my account by 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. If I don't receive it, I'll have to share these wonderful pictures with everyone. With that, I turned to leave. As I passed him, I deliberately lowered my voice. Didn't you go to great lengths to win over Victoria Jones? What's this? Treating your former meal ticket like this now? Are you trying to completely erase that dark part of your past? I hadn't taken more than a few steps before I heard the sound of a glass shattering behind me. I sneered. So what if he had latched onto a wealthy matron? He was still the same impulsive hothead, nothing more than a clown. The next day, the transfer arrived in my account as scheduled. I immediately transferred the money to my mother. Should I give this to Mrs. Jones? I shook my head gently. Mom, after you return this money to them, let's just let it all end. We and they are from two different worlds now. My mother was silent for a moment before finally nodding. Okay. With Mr. Jones bedridden, would Mrs. Jones really stay by his side forever? With that kind of parenting, it was no wonder they had raised a daughter as malicious as Victoria. But none of that had anything to do with us anymore. From now on, we were just ordinary strangers. Afterward, my mother completed the transfer, and then she and my father came to help me manage my new restaurant. Chapter 16. This was also our way of distancing ourselves from the Jones family. One day 2 years later, Leo cautiously told me that he had run into Victoria when he went back to our hometown. She's working on a factory assembly line now, as a packer. She wears a mask to cover her face. You know how it is in that small town where news travels fast. As soon as word got out that Victoria was disfigured, my annoying ex made a point of going to bother her. Apparently, she's been through several jobs and can't hold one for long. Any position that requires her to show her face, the boss sees her and finds an excuse to fire her. Now, she can only do odd jobs in the shadows, out of sight. I nodded calmly, feeling nothing. Considering how she had driven me to disfigurement and suicide in my past life, this punishment was nothing. The implication was clear. She was destined to be disfigured sooner or later. Also, Leo hesitated. Her mom ran off with a younger man a year ago. I think the guy was only 2 years older than Victoria. Her dad had no one to take care of him, so he passed away 6 months ago. Such an ending was to be expected. Seeing Leo's hesitant expression, I asked, "Do you think I was too cruel?" Leo thought for a moment and then shook his head. "The Jones family brought it on themselves. What does it have to do with you?" I nodded silently and went back to managing the restaurant's affairs. Behind me, Leo was still muttering, "Sincere, don't blame yourself. Sympathizing with a woman like that will only bring you bad luck." He was right. Fortunately, in this life, we had both escaped that miserable past and been given a new beginning.